Okay, so have you ever stopped to wonder if your entire digital life, your news feeds, the media you scroll through every single day, what if all of it is just an illusion? Just shadows projected onto a wall? Well, if you have, you're definitely not alone. In fact, you're actually tapping into a 2,400-year-old philosophy that, believe it or not, still completely defines how we grasp reality today.
We're tracking the massive, world-altering ripple effects of Plato. We're going to take a journey together, from illusion all the way to enlightenment, and trace how one guy's ideas from ancient Athens somehow traversed centuries to shape our modern schools, our world religions, and literally our entire political system.
Section 1. The Man and the Academy. Let's look at Plato's origins. So let's meet the man himself. Born around 427 BCE into an aristocratic Athenian family, his real name was actually Aristocles. Plato, that was just a nickname, meaning broad shoulders. Pretty cool, right? His journey is honestly fascinating. He came of age during the Peloponnesian War, which left him incredibly disillusioned with politics. Then, in his 20s, he met and studied under the brilliant Socrates, learning through this absolutely relentless method of questioning. But then, in 399 BCE, his mentor was executed. It was a tragedy that profoundly traumatized him, and it was this exact trauma that eventually drove Plato to found the Academy in 387 BCE, which is widely considered the very first institution of higher learning in the entire Western world. Moving on to Section 2, Escaping the Cave, Platonic Idealism.
Now we get to his core worldview, Platonic idealism. Plato argues that the physical world around us, the material stuff we can touch and see, is not the true reality. It's flawed, it's constantly changing, and it's based on mere opinion. But standing high above all that, we have what he called the world of forms. This is the eternal, absolutely perfect realm of true knowledge. Think of a circle, for example. In the material world, you can never draw a mathematically perfect circle, right? There's always going to be a microscopic bump somewhere. But in your mind, the concept of a perfect circle exists. For Plato, true essence, whether it's a perfect circle or a massive concept like true justice, only actually exists in this eternal realm of ideas.
To really drive this home, Plato illustrated this painful journey toward truth through his most famous story, the Allegory of the Cave. Just imagine this. Prisoners chained in a pitch-black cave since birth. All they can see is a blank wall. Right behind them is a roaring fire, and people walk past it, casting shadows onto that wall. For these prisoners, those shadows aren't just shadows. They are absolute reality. It's their whole world. But then, one prisoner escapes. He walks outside. At first, he's totally blinded by the sun, but eventually his eyes adjust and he sees the real, vibrant world for what it is. This is that painful journey from ignorance to truth. But here's the real tragedy. When he goes back down into the cave to free the others and tell them about this amazing real world, they don't celebrate him. No way. They mock him, they reject him, they actually prefer their comfortable shadows. It's just an incredibly powerful narrative about how society so often rejects the people who dare to point out the truth. All right, Section 3, the Chariot of the Soul, Internal Harmony. So how do we actually navigate this journey internally? Well, Plato mapped this out using a seriously striking metaphor for human psychology. He envisioned the soul as a chariot. The charioteer driving the whole thing, that represents our reason, seeking wisdom. And he is desperately trying to hold the reins and guide two wildly different horses. On one side, you have the white horse. That's our spirit, our passionate, emotional drive that seeks courage. On the other side is the black horse, representing our appetite, our bodily desires constantly seeking pleasures and material needs. According to Plato, true justice isn't just some legal code written on a piece of paper. No, it's an internal harmony that balances reason, spirit, and desire. He believed that mastering this internal chariot leads us to the four cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, moderation, and justice. Basically, you have to use reason to guide your passions and appetites if you want to live a truly fulfilling life. Section 4. Echoes in Religion. Plato's vast influence. Plato's influence was so incredibly vast that even his own most famous student, Aristotle, had to define himself in contrast to his teacher. While Plato urged us to look at what could be, constantly reaching for those ideal forms, Aristotle chose to look at what is, focusing heavily on observing the physical, material world right in front of him. But Plato's focus on the unseen, that ideal reality, it absolutely didn't fade away. In fact, it deeply influenced theology and faith across the board.
A movement called Neoplatonism carried these ideas forward, shaping Islamic political philosophy through brilliant thinkers like Al-Farabi, who actually adopted Plato's concept of the philosopher king to the ideal Islamic polity. It also provided a massive, crucial stepping stone for Christian theologians. We see this historical synthesis clearly when we look at modern scholarship tracking the journey of these ideas all the way from Plato to Christ.
We can actually see this directly in the writings of St. Augustine. He famously wrote, "By reading these books of the Platonists, I had been prompted to look for truth as something incorporeal." Augustine used this Platonic ladder to sort of ascend from the physical world to the spiritual one. Now, to be fair, he did ultimately conclude that the Platonists lacked the humility to find the true way because they relied purely on their own intellect rather than divine incarnation, but it is completely undeniable that Platonic thought paved the way for his spiritual journey.
Which brings us to Section 5, Misunderstood Moderns, Misinterpreting Plato. Now, this is where things get a little ironic. Some of the most famous modern philosophers actually misunderstood Plato by forcing his ancient ideas into their own brand new vocabularies. Take Descartes, for example. He framed Plato's forms as innate ideas reached purely by rational first principles. Then you have Locke, who believed Plato completely ignored sensory experience and just ventured out into empty space. And Kant, he viewed the forms as unattainable things in themselves that were permanently hidden behind a veil. But here's the thing, they all missed a vital piece of the puzzle. Plato never pushed a strict two-worlds rationalism that totally discarded human experience. Actually, scratch that, he believed the exact opposite, that learning begins with our senses. Experiencing the physical world is exactly what sparks our recollection of the forms. The material world isn't ignored at all. It's the necessary starting point.
Finally, Section 6, Paidia and Politics, Plato in the Present.
Let's land the plane in the 21st century, because Plato's 2,400-year-old warnings absolutely apply to us right now. He heavily criticized the flaws of Athenian democracy, specifically warning about its severe vulnerability to charismatic demagogues. I mean, he watched firsthand as the masses were manipulated by populism, literally mistaking the shadows on the wall for sound policy. Because of this, he controversially argued for philosopher kings, leaders who are guided strictly by reason, wisdom, and virtue, rather than just the shifting whims of the majority. Whether you agree with his solution or not, it's an incredibly sharp diagnosis of political vulnerabilities that echoes loudly through history.
But to actually build those wise leaders and wise citizens, Plato knew we needed a very specific type of education. He introduced this concept called Paidia, which basically translates to serious play and protected intellectual freedom. Plato argued that philosophical activity shouldn't be a chore. It should actually be a form of joyful, engaging play. He famously noted that knowledge forced upon a mind by compulsion will simply never stick.
And wow, does that create a stark contrast with our world today? Modern compulsion in our schools so often relies on rigid assessments, strict efficiency, and rote learning, just memorizing facts for a test. But Platonic Paidia argues for playful, creative, harmonious individual growth. It's a powerful reminder that if we want to cultivate true critical thinking and real human fulfillment, we urgently need to reimagine education so it's less like an industrial assembly line and more like an engaging lifelong journey out of the cave.
Which brings us to our final question for you. How will you escape your own cave today? Because the shadows on our walls are constantly flickering through social media algorithms, customized news bubbles, and unquestioned popular opinions. Plato invites us all to take that courageous and, sometimes painful step toward the light. Examine the media you consume, try to rein in that black horse of your immediate appetites, and engage in the serious play of learning.